city of St. Louis Park, just right next door.
Great. Thanks, Michael, for joining us today. Mindy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mindy Aller. I am a member of the Transportation Commission for the City of Edina.
Perry.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Perry Vetter. I'm the Parks and Recreation Director for the City of Edina and Staff Liaison to the Parks and Recreation Commission and the Arts and Culture Commission.
Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel Wells. I work for the City of Bellevue, Washington. Also, I work with Jennifer. I'm the Urban Forestry Specialist.
Thank you for joining us today. Tom Swenson.
I'm Tom Swenson, Assistant Director of Parks and Natural Resources for City of Edina.
Whoever is 405, area code.
Hi, everybody. My name is Grace Hancock. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator for the City of Edina, and I am calling from a bus and map, which is why I'm only on audio today. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Michelle Horan.
Hi, I'm Michelle Horan. I am a member of the Edina Energy and Environment Commission.
Thanks, Michelle. And MJ.
Hi, everyone. MJ Lehman, Community Engagement Coordinator for the City of Edina.
Okay, I think I got. Is that everybody? Did I get everybody? Okay, you want to do your share your screen now? I talked a little bit about why we're here. In Edina, we have a number of different boards and commissions, just like a lot of communities do. We have energy and environment. We have a Parks and Rec. We have transportation, a planning commission. Pretty common for communities like ours and like Bellevue and Highland Park to have those kind of commissions too. Might be named something differently, but we've all got something like that. They all had on their work plans. We give through a kind of iterative process with our city council. We give a work plan to all of our different boards and commissions. And there was one part of that process is that we solicit ideas from them to see what they want to work on. And there were a number of them that had an idea about tree protection, tree preservation. That's why we're here today. We wanted to try to get those groups in our own community to work together. And we thought this would be a good way to provide some baseline education for them about what other communities do in this regard. So we try to find some communities that have good tree preservation protection practices and ordinances, and we also wanted comparable communities, and that's why we reached out to Highland Park and Bellevue and St. Louis Park. So that's what we are here today, and that's what we're going to try to accomplish today. And on the screen right now is the staff recommendation that staff provided to our council with regards to this work plan item internally. So if we can go to the next part. This is our agenda of what we'd like to accomplish today. And this is a beautiful view of our community of Centennial Lakes Park, which is one of our shining stars in terms of public parks in Edina.
So we actually asked you a question, or actually all the commissions that were invited tonight, a question about how the city can improve the way it manages trees and supports tree conservation. So we just kind of provided a quick summary of some of the results of that survey so that other commissioners could see what other individuals said, because the survey went to everyone, so it might not be everyone that's participating at this meeting, but might be individuals who watch this a little bit later. And we shared this information also with our panelists that these are the things that we were hearing from commissions about improving the community education resources around those trees, the conservation, talking about installation of some boulevard, private property enforcement regulations, improving that management of trees on city property, and then also the race and equity component as well. So hopefully, as you keep these in mind as we're asking our questions tonight, and hopefully we can pull out some of the different things that other cities are doing and how maybe that could support some of these themes that the commissioners had as well.
So looking at our objectives for tonight, the main thing is to learn from other cities about how they manage trees and how they support tree conservation through their ordinances, through their policies and other methods. The goal of that is then to inform future commission work plan initiatives. So the kind of the expectations for tonight's meeting is to use this opportunity to listen and learn from our panelists, come from local communities and distant communities, and to save any opinions or ideas that commissioners may have for your regular commission meetings. Save those discussions for your larger group meetings. And as always, to be respectful of all participants tonight. So as we mentioned before, these are our panelists. We have Michael from the City of St. Louis Park. I don't believe Hannibal was able to join us from Minnetonka, but we have Joe from Highland Park, Illinois, and Jennifer and Rachel from Bellevue, Washington. So we'll start with, let's see, stop sharing for a little bit. And I'll go through, oops. Sorry, just trying to pull up the questions.
I have them if you want me to kick it off.
Yeah, if you could. I just, sorry, I
Yeah.
can't. They were in the slide. Now they're
No
gone.
worries. No worries, they're down at the bottom, but so for our panelists, and then we can, I mean, if there's one person that wants to start, we can move through all of them. Not everybody needs to answer everything, and I believe these questions were sent in advance, so you should have an idea of the questions you're asking. But one of the first ones that we were asking, what is your city's practice for tree preservation as a component of development or redevelopment? You can see that's one of the main concerns of commissioners. So hearing how is that something that you handle in your city? Is there one of you that might be willing to go first? Yes, go for it.
Didn't want to just unmute myself and start talking.
Thanks, Joe.
Can you hear me all right? Great.
Yep.
So Highland Park, Illinois, just north of Chicago a bit. The very strong program as far as forestry program supported by our city council, elected officials, everybody straight through. So that's really where the strength comes from. We've got basically any tree over 8 inches in diameter in Highland Park is considered protected. So a permit's required, whether it's construction or not construction. If it's just a homeowner who's applying for a permit, it is a free permit. And we typically sign off on dead, dying, diseased, and hazardous types of trees and good forestry practice. When it moves to construction, all construction permits, all building permits have a tree component to it. The city forester will review them. If they apply, then the permit is required. Trees themselves are broken down into 3 classes: key, protected, and heritage. If they want to remove trees based on that, they fall into those categories. Certain fees are assessed, and then based on what category they fell into, there is a replacement that's required. There is a buyout option for the replacement if the lot is already overcrowded. Say they put a bigger home on an already existing wooded lot, but we try always encourage people to plant the trees. We'd rather see the trees than the money. And so that's just basically. We also have steep slopes, which is kind of a unique area. We've got a lot of ravines that go to Lake Michigan, and we've got bluff face on Lake Michigan, and tree preservation applies to those areas as well. And it's certainly at a little bit higher level because the tree removal on slopes can lead to very expensive problems. So it's a much higher level on the steep slopes. Erosion problems, people losing property and tableland, it's an issue. But that was just a very quick, brief cover. I'll let someone else chime in.
Thanks, Joe. Rachel or Jennifer, do you want to speak to Bellevue's perspective?
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you for inviting us here today. And in general, I think it's really neat that you have organized this. And I've heard we occasionally get our board and commission members together for something like this, but doesn't happen often. And yeah, I hope we can do something similar in Bellevue and would be interested in having you all participate. So Bellevue is, historically used to be more of a suburban city. It has really redeveloped pretty significantly. We're kind of the major suburb right outside of Seattle, but are a pretty major employment center now. So we've had a lot of development and redevelopment over the past 30 years. So our comprehensive plan and our code tries to both allow for that development, but while also preserving our trees. But we are hearing from residents and have heard from residents for many years the desire to strengthen our tree codes. So it's interesting to hear, Joe, what you all are doing in Highland Park. So we do have permit requirements for removing trees, and we've taken kind of an interesting approach where we have requirements for our single family neighborhoods, for like our downtown, which is pretty urban, slightly different requirements. And then we have one single family neighborhood that has always had more of kind of an equestrian feel to it, really large lots, more significant tree canopy. They have slightly more strict permit requirements that they kind of decided amongst themselves. I think as part of that neighborhood was annexed by the city, that they wanted to require a permit anytime any tree over, I think, 6 inches was removed, 6 inches in diameter. For the rest of the city, you just need a permit if you want to remove 5 or more trees. And so, that's frankly something I think a lot of our residents would like to see changed. And then for development, we have requirements around tree retention of 30% of the trees on a property. Although, again, that's something where I think some of our residents would like to see that number higher. This is for single family development. And then for replacement, we have a 1-to-1 ratio for replacement. Except for in critical areas, our codes are more stringent, and Bellevue is pretty hilly. So we have, steep slopes. We have, we border 2 lakes. So we have different codes for our steep slopes, our shorelines, our streams. Those are considered critical areas. So the codes are more strict. But for, the just regular single family land use, not critical area, it's a 1-to-1 requirement for replacement, kind of regardless of how significant the original tree was. And it's the Northwest, so we have a lot of really mature evergreens. So that's kind of something our residents would like to see changed. I think those are, that's probably kind of the main things for our tree preservation. And then I would say we have a goal of a 40% tree canopy. We're at 37% right now. And so, I think similar to you all, we have a recognition we need to, look at our codes and look at where we might strengthen them.
Thank you. Michael, you want to share St. Louis Park's perspective?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say ours is maybe a little bit between Joe from Highland and Jennifer from Bellevue. We don't have a strict tree preservation policy for single family or 2 home buildings, so they're free to cut down what they please on their private property. Anything over that, all trees over 5 inches are protected, and they do need a permit. I shouldn't say all trees. We have a list of trees that are not protected, ones that are considered undesirable. But of desirable species, anything over generally over 5 inches is protected, and we have to review that to be removed. We do have a formula that we use for when they do need to remove trees on those properties. It does allow for some removals before they have to start replacing those inches. But in general, if they start to remove trees, that needs to be replaced based on our formula. And if anybody's interested in that, I can share that in the future too. As far as if it's a development project and they're going to remove a public tree, that gets replaced at an inch for inch basis. So there's a fee for every inch of the tree that's removed. So if it's a 30-inch tree, it gets charged 30 times our fee, which this year our fee is $145 an inch. And then that gets planted elsewhere in the community, goes into our tree planting fund. So, so I feel like that's pretty reasonable, and that does deter a lot of development or a lot of public tree removals having that cost associated with it. We also require tree protection for the trees that are reserved on those properties. So if they say they're going to protect, if they say they're going to keep it and not replace it, they have to follow our tree preservation plan, which is essentially protecting the drip line area under the drip line of that tree. Whether that's successful or not, you know, that's you know, can go back or forth. Sometimes it. So just a little background, I'm fairly new to the city, replacing somebody who had been here for 30 years. So I don't know how successful it was when that old forester was here, but it appears like we maybe need to watchdog them a little more. But other than that, I think we're pretty similar to a couple of the other communities we talked to.
Great, thank you, Michael. This next question we have for our panelists is, what is your city's practice regarding boulevard trees? That can include, you know, who is responsible for installing them, who maintains them, where those associated costs are, where those associated costs come from. If there's anyone who wants to speak to that right out the gate, otherwise I can pick someone.
I can start since
Joe?
I left off the last. Oh, sorry. Oh, shoot.
No,
Sorry,
go for it.
Everybody's being so quiet.
I was just trying to keep it in order.
Yeah, I'm just keeping rolling here. We'll snake through this.
You go ahead and I'll go after you.
Sounds good. So in the city of St. Louis Park, all public trees are maintained and handled by the city of St. Louis Park or a hired contractor. If a homeowner would like to prune their boulevard tree, they have to use one of our licensed contractors, and we'll allow that at their expense. They can't ask for reimbursement from us. So we do handle everything with the public trees.
I would say that's we're exactly the same. We plant them, we prune them, we remove them, and if someone has, you know, we let the homeowner, when we have planting going on, if we do involve them in the process, so they can have input as to what species goes there, but we don't go out and buy a special species for them if they want something exotic. It has to be something that we've bid and something that have procured. And on private property, I guess that, like, if they do a removal permit, if a tree's dead, dying, diseased, or hazardous, they're not required to replant that tree. But if they do want to remove a tree on private property, then there could be a planting component as well.
Follow-up question for Joe and Michael. So you both said that your cities install boulevard trees. Did your cities have like some kind of process to determine like what streets get boulevard trees, or is it kind of more or less maintaining and replacing existing trees that are in boulevards?
I guess I'm still up here. We have a tree inventory, so we have spaces that are identified for replacement. We also do, you know, we remove about 1.5% to 2%, it seems, of the tree population every year. About 30,000 trees, so you end up removing maybe, you know, 250 to 300 trees a year. So you know, you've got a pretty heavy replacement that's ongoing, just from the volume of trees that you're maintaining. But then we do infill vacant spots, but we don't have many open spots. You know, the community's been around for quite a while, and we've had a pretty strong planting program for a lot of years. So there's, you know, most of this, usually when you find a space and put a tree in there, you get a call from an angry resident who says, you know, I never wanted a tree there in the first place.
Yeah, I'd say that's that's mirrors what's going on here too. We do plant 1 for 1 trees. Tree gets removed on the boulevard for some reason, we replace that. And then we fill in holes with the money we retain from construction project fees. So, or other public trees that were removed elsewhere in the community. So very similar.
Great, thank you. Jennifer or Rachel, anything to add from Bellevue about boulevard trees?
I can I can speak to that one. I think for us, it's maybe a little more complicated or complex. This it's more kind of based on the land use. So for our downtown, as part of redevelopment there, we require the developer or property owner to put in street trees and to maintain them based on our requirements for what's allowed. So we have, in some cases, the private property owner is, installing and maintaining the trees. For, our right-of-way areas that are more in like our single-family neighborhoods, we manage most of those street trees on our boulevards, I should say, but we do have some areas where we don't really manage those, so it's kind of left more to the private property owner. And then technically the trees on our boulevards are really our transportation department's responsibility, but they, transfer funds over to our parks department to maintain those trees. So it's a bit of a mix of, city departments maintaining trees and private property owners, whether it's, in our more urban areas or our single family areas.
Great, thank you. The next question for panelists is, what resources or community education programs does your city provide to residents to promote trees or tree conservation? Joe, do you want to start? Since that seems to be the theme we're going with here.
Sure, happy to. So we have a very green community, so that makes things a lot easier. But we start with just the basic stuff: social media, web pages, city's website, Facebook, Instagram, social media. I don't do a lot of, but there's a lot of people here that do. So everything gets promoted. We have community planting events. We have Arbor Day, which we celebrate every year. We're in Tree City, USA, which a lot of communities are. But so the commitment is there. I think we also Keith O'Haron, our former city forester, just left, but I think he just finalized Tree Campus, which Highland Park, they worked with the Highland Park High School to get them designated as a tree campus through the ISA, one of the first ones in the country, if I'm not mistaken. And so, just those types of events where you're engaging the public, you're engaging the schools, events, social media, publications. We send brochures to, people on steep slopes about, not topping trees, not removing trees from the slope. So just a lot of different avenues.
Thank you. Michael, St. Louis Park.
Yep, pretty much about the same thing that Joe had said from Highland Park. Social media campaigns. We do volunteer planting events a few times a year. No specific community education programs as written in your question here, but really just more outreach to volunteers whenever we're doing larger planting events, and then outreach through or notifications or special alerts through social media channels.
Thank you. And Rachel and Jennifer from Bellevue.
I'll take this one. Yeah, we do actually have a lot of educational and volunteer programming here in Bellevue. We do some outreach via social media, and we have some pretty large volunteer planting events. But through both our planning and community development department, as well as our parks department, we're able to do a lot of in-person education, at least in pre-pandemic times. We're in the process of discovering what that's going to look like again. but we have educational tours from our park rangers and staff and parks, tree tours in the city through my position, and by volunteers who also create tree tours in their neighborhood and focus on peer-to-peer education. We do a lot of volunteer stewardship through opportunities like Eco Fridays and Stewardship Saturdays, where many times there will be businesses who will come out and volunteer, or community groups, or just individuals who are really enthusiastic about maintaining our natural environment and engaging in some of that great hands-on work. We have a master naturalist program here in Bellevue where volunteers go through extensive training, and then they'll provide 100+ hours of maintenance, planning, and educational service over a 2-year period. But we're always working on raising environmental awareness on trees and environment and sustainability, and making sure we're diversifying our program as our city grows.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm curious, could you elaborate a little more on what a tree tourist is? I've never heard that expression before.
A tree tour.
Tree tour. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a tree walk where we talk about the species of trees, some cool things about trees, but we also talk about community history and interesting things about the neighborhood and the city. So it's a really good way to learn about the history of the city and the community, to learn about the environment, and to connect between community members.
Great, thank you. Next question.
Could I add one thing to?
Of course.
I think one thing, and maybe the other two communities are doing this also, but one thing that we do that I feel is really connects us with the residents is we do free consultation. So if they call us, we'll come to their property and we'll look at private trees, give them advice, recommend, practices, kind of a unbiased opinion on there. So I think we make a lot of connection through those channels, one-on-one, which is pretty great, I think, which is one of the reasons I enjoy my job. So
great, thank you for sharing that, Michael. The next question is, and we've already kind of touched on this a little bit, but what are your city's policies or practices regarding trees in parks or on other public properties? Joe, do you want to start?
Sure. So I know we've talked about the tree preservation ordinance, but if anybody's interested, if you go to the city's website at www.cityhpil.com, and our code is in there, it's chapter 94.4, which is specific to tree preservation and construction. But if you go to just 94, that is the start of specific to trees. So, I mean, the code would apply to all those. Highland Park's a little unique in that we have a park district. So we've got a lot of like ravines and stuff that run through town, and they tend to flood, and those are great places for parks. So we've got quite a few open areas that they manage. So I'm specific to like boulevards and municipal properties, 160 properties, but they can be as small as a postage stamp to a city hall or something like that. So, but for us, the overriding document would be chapter 94.
Great, thank you. Michael in St. Louis Park?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add upon what we've talked about earlier. Maintain and take care of parks and boulevard trees. I guess the one thing with parks is that also comes out of those funds that we have set aside from development. That's how we put trees in our parks.
Sure. Okay. Rachel or Jennifer from Bellevue?
Sure. Yeah, I can take this one. Yeah, we have pretty strict policies around preserving trees in our parks. We have, gosh, I forget how much acreage we have of forested areas in addition to our programmed parks, but a pretty significant amount of our city's urban forest is, natural forested areas that our parks department manages. A big part of that work is really just kind of fighting invasives and maintaining and restoring the health of the forest. We've done it before, and right now we're doing another urban forest health assessment. So to really look at kind of the state of the urban forest on city property, and then to really try to prioritize areas for restoration and planting. So we do some planting. We do a fair amount of planting in our parks, but a lot of it is more kind of replacement planting or kind of succession planting for the future when some of, 50 years from now, when some of the trees we have may, start to fail. And then as Rachel mentioned, we do a fair amount of kind of volunteer work or coordinating with volunteer groups to help with some of this, restoration and planting work is kind of a way of both getting that work done, but also kind of educating our residents.
Great, thank you. Just a couple more questions left for our panelists. Next one is, what challenges has your city faced related to tree management and conservation? Joe?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of different initiatives, and depending upon where you are in tree preservation, you get this is, I don't know if I'm saying this properly here, so I'll back up. We've taken on we're doing pollinator habitat for along these bike trails that we have. So we're going in there and we're removing basically invasive plant material. And a lot of the public like it because it makes a nice screen. And we tend to get some bad review because we're removing Norway maples and buckthorns and replacing it with pollinator habitat. So that speaks to the education piece where we're always trying to, put out information on this. If you go to our website, you'll see all the information on there. But you get people who like what they've had for a lot of years and what they've seen, and they're not open to change. And it's one of the harder parts of the job as far as trying to manage and conserve and promote and bring on change is you have to change the people as well. And like I said, we get a lot of support here for all our initiatives, but it's just hard to change everybody.
Thank you. Michael, challenges St. Louis Park has encountered?
Yeah, I think I could probably come up with a list of urban forestry challenges as a group here. We could probably come up with quite a catalog, but I'd say for me, it's, preserving or having enough soil volume, plantable soil volume, uncompacted soil volume with organic matter, appropriate organic matter. And I'd say tree pruning from day one, being able to prune. So, we're seeing in our heritage trees are storm damage from trees that have poor structure from just not sufficient pruning, just because it appears to me that that's really one of the toughest things to fund is pruning. We can fund, storm damage cleanup, and we can fund planting, but trying to fund enough money to make sure everything gets pruned appropriately is always a challenge. So I would say those are our two biggest challenges amongst the rest of them.
Thank you. And then Jennifer or Rachel?
I can definitely echo that funding challenge for maintenance and for pruning, but also really related to growth and the challenges of climate change. As Jennifer said, we've grown a lot from a suburb to really a large multicultural city over the last 30 years or so. And that, of course, comes with major redevelopment and tree loss. We're a jobs hub for really major employers in the region, like Amazon and T-Mobile, Microsoft, others that I'm sure you know. And we're also trying to keep up with housing development, especially affordable housing. And so we really need our code to catch up with that. There's also, we also sometimes struggle with education and awareness. There's some single family property owners who will cut down trees, and we don't really have a good way to track that right now. There's very varied environmental awareness around trees, and as well as what's required for permitting. And I think it would be really helpful for us to have more education and plain language information available for folks. We do a tree assessment using LiDAR every 5 years or so to address canopy, but we don't have a more detailed tree-to-tree database, except for the ones that our Parks Department manages along streetscape. So that makes fine grade monitoring a challenge for us. As far as climate change, it's just causing additional stress by way of less moisture and more heat than our traditional native species are adapted for. So it makes our trees more vulnerable to pathogens. So we're needing to replace more trees, do more maintenance, and sometimes do things like installing irrigation where it's appropriate, or planting species that will be more appropriate to our future climate.
Great, thank you. The last question we have before we open it up to all participants is, where have you seen success in tree management and conservation through your city's existing policies or programs or ordinances? Joe?
Sure. I've said this before, kind of alluded to it, but really what makes the whole program successful is the support and backing you get from the top down, as far as, you know, the city manager, the city council, the director of public works, you know, everybody who's got a stake in the game, from the engineering department. I saw a question earlier about, you know, planting in boulevards. You know, our engineering department wouldn't dream of putting in a parking lot without some sort of bioswale or planting area, a rain garden. They just know that that's standard. Putting in permeable pavers, you know, to help water quality, that's getting to be standard on all of our parking lots we do. So when you've got the support of all those people, we end up getting, you know, funding for tree trimming, we get funding for tree removal, we get funding for tree planting. We've certainly had to be flexible in COVID because those numbers have had moved a little bit, but you know what, they go away and they always come back. So when you have all that together, then you can start working on, you know, the tree preservation during construction and things like that, and tailoring those lists. If you've got replacement requirements, you would then start getting the native trees. So if you remove a native tree, you got to plant a native tree, and little things like that. You know, I hate to see, you know, good hardwood oaks come down. We have a very good, strong native oak canopy, and it kills me to see those come down. But you know, I can accept it because I know that I'm building the tree canopy for the future by requiring them to put in the species that I know are gonna bring that around for the next generation. So, you know, that's the way I see it.
Great, thank you, Joe. Michael, successes from St. Louis Park you wish to share or highlight?
Yeah, so again, I've only been here for, well, since April, so still evaluating our successes. I mean, I was left with a great program, so I'll say that. Seems like things are running pretty well. From what I've seen over these few months here, is definitely our ordinances allow us to replace, shouldn't say replace because we can't replace mature trees, but we can replant for mature trees relatively adequately, so that's a benefit. And we also, our tree EAB injection program, I think, has been very successful in allowing us to continue to maintain our other trees and not have to focus all of our resources on trying to sanitize for EAB. So I think that program has been very successful.
Thank you. And last but not least, Rachel and Jennifer from Bellevue.
Sure, I can maybe start, and then Rachel, if, feel free to chime in after me. I think some of our successes are, well, we've formed an interdepartmental team to work on tree canopy related issues. So I think that's been good, just to, you know, continue to improve our interdepartmental coordination on kind of more policy related issues, but also on, you know, more specific projects. As things come up, I think we do a good job with outreach and education, or we have done a good job on that for a while, but we're still, really kind of building on that and expanding it. And, through Rachel's work, really looking at including more of racial equity lens in our outreach and education around trees and, for our future, our tree giveaway this fall. So we're excited about that. In general, I think our residents are really engaged and passionate about trees. And a lot of them are pretty knowledgeable too, just on maintaining trees and also like tree codes and that sort of thing. So I think we just have a lot of passionate residents. And then one thing I'll mention that also just kind of answers a question in the chat. From more of a technical standpoint, I think we do have a big focus on, really growing our tree canopy in the right of way. And, especially in our downtown, one of the things we've realized is, the trees were only lasting maybe 20 or so years because they, just were in these tree pits that weren't big enough for them to really grow and thrive. So, as part of our downtown land use code update, we really increased the requirements for soil volumes. And I don't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I think, the idea is that there's just going to be, much more room for trees to grow under sidewalks and that sort of thing, so they can just, have a longer life and be healthier. So that was kind of one like more technical thing, but I think also pretty significant in just sort of preserving the health of our tree canopy and, some of the areas where we really need it most, like in our downtown.
I was going to talk about how lucky we are to have a community that cares so deeply about trees as well. People are really quite politically involved, and they actively let the city know that trees are a big priority for them, and that really keeps it on the front burner for us, and we find that really helpful. And just getting so much volunteer engagement about the environment and peer-to-peer learning with other community members really helps increase overall environmental awareness, and we hope that that's going to continue, especially as our city becomes more and more multicultural. As Jennifer said, we're in the middle of our first ever tree giveaway, and we're really looking to prioritize low canopy areas. I don't know if you all are familiar with American Forest's new tool, the Tree Equity Score, but we'll be using that to weight applications. And we're also looking at doing some outreach to some of our larger companies and employers to get their support, both for tree planting and tree projects in the city, and are considering things like how to better fund maintenance and tree replacement programs through maybe an impact certification or carbon offsets.
Great, thank you. We've got a little bit of time here before the Q&A, so we've got one last question for panelists. Thinking about equity in tree canopy coverage, how do you address requests for plantings or tree management from those that are not property owners? So looking at areas where you have renters or you have multifamily buildings.
I can start, but so we don't have a lot of, if we take any request, we have pretty much we don't have a lot of available tree planting spaces. So, if there's a space, we're going to add it to our list, and we're going to try and get a tree. So, I mean, we look at the priority of the space. Are there wires? How wide's the boulevard? Is it in a municipal area, residential area, or business area? And then from there, just prioritize it and try and get a tree in there. We tend to meet most requests for getting trees in. Now, if they'd asked for 15 trees, I don't think that would happen. But most people, 1 or 2 here, it seems to be doable within a reasonable amount of time.
Thank you. Michael, or?
Yep. Yeah, the same. if they request a tree, we'll try to put it in there. You know, our parks are, I think, I find out from the maintenance people pretty quick when we try to put a tree in somewhere why there wasn't a tree there. But so if we can sneak them in, you know, under the cover of darkness, we can get them in there. But yep, if we treat every resident the same, if they have a request, we'll try to fill it.
Thank you. Jennifer, Rachel, any comments on how Bellevue considers equity in tree canopy coverage?
Yes, we don't have a program where residents can just request trees to be planted. That's partly why we're so excited about this new tree giveaway, but we're also looking at working with the local housing authority, which to plant trees, which is some of our lowest income housing, and many of those buildings do not have air conditioning. And as we increasingly experience more heat waves, that's becoming a huge problem, and it's disproportionately impacting lower income folks. And so we're working with them to find some properties where we can plant some trees, as well as trying to prioritize our socioeconomically diverse neighborhoods in our giveaway program, and really focusing on bringing the canopy in those specific neighborhoods up to that 40% number, as well as, and because we've got, you know, neighborhoods that are beyond that 40% number, and so bringing everyone up so that everyone has equitable access to those environmental services.
Great, thank you. Well, we've come to the point of the agenda now where we're going to open up questions to our commissioners who are participating. MJ, there's a couple questions that were submitted in the chat. Do you want me to read those off first, and then we can open it up to other questions?
I think that's a good idea.
All right, so the first question is, how do your cities plan for and build boulevards on streets to support tree planting?
I haven't been involved in that yet here at the City of St. Louis Park, so I have my own ideas, but I haven't gone through that process yet. So
we're pretty well built out. So when a street gets rebuilt, there aren't new streets going in. The street gets rebuilt. Typically, they would rather have bike lanes and things like that than a tree boulevard. So there's a lot of stuff competing for the space in the road, additional turn lanes. You know, so it's tough to fit boulevards in, but when we do, I mentioned previously, when we do like parking lots and things like that, we're putting in, you know, bioswales or rain gardens into wherever we can. But it's, you know, you don't want to lose parking spaces in a downtown. There's a lot of things to consider when you're allocating more space for trees.
Yeah, I'll add for Bellevue. We're mostly built out, although we have some some larger kind of redevelopment areas, more sort of light industrial neighborhoods that are being turned into higher density, mixed use, transit oriented development neighborhoods, where we are actually creating some new streets. But for the more existing streets, we have, I think as part of our comprehensive plan, mapped out which are kind of the main sort of boulevard gateways to the city. And so those ones are really kind of our priority streets for, you know, maintaining and building out our tree canopy. And then for, you know, where we actually do have some new streets going in, or we're kind of, you know, rebuilding or tearing up the streets, we do have, for those, we are really looking at how we can kind of maximize tree planting and also, you know, low impact development with bioswales and that sort of thing, and also bike lanes. So there's kind of a lot of sort of competing interests and things we want to squeeze into some of these new streets that we're creating. But it kind of has started with our comprehensive plan and sort of designating those streets as sort of priority green streets, and then going from there and addressing that like in our capital budgets and stuff.
Great, thank you. Next question, I think some of you may have already addressed this, but I'm curious if any of you have consideration for placement of trees related to reducing heat island effect, for example, in parking lots. Joe, I think you had mentioned before about trees and bioswales as part of parking lots.
Sure. So for that would be for a public lot, but then also with any private construction. So if a subway's coming in, they're putting in a parking lot, there is a landscaping requirement, and that goes through one of our commissions, the Plan Design Commission, and they basically have to meet code, which requires planting in the islands and screening of the headlights that shine out. So it's covered both ways.
Let's see, St. Louis Parker Bellevue, do you want to comment on
Sure.
tree placement related to heat island effect?
As far as the placement, we're kind of like Joe, where we do, require trees. Parking lots to have islands at the end of parking rows and for them to have trees planted in them. And we also require a soil volume of about 450 cubic feet per tree, which I'm not quite sure that is taking place or not, but that is part of our plan, and I hope that's happening. We also do have in our ordinance that they are allowed to go above and beyond that, and that would get approved also. So if you want to do something more contemporary, like a bioswale or impervious or pervious surface or something like that, we definitely will allow that and recommend it.
I think we've predominantly mostly addressed that in our comments so far, but with our work, we just do a lot of education for homeowners around kind of how to shade your house, how to save energy with proper tree placement, especially with the south and west side placement here. Coming up the water, we get pretty significant western sun in the afternoons in the summer. And just reducing the heat island effect overall is something that is a really huge concern when less than half of people here have air conditioning. So we talk a lot about proper placement of street trees and even trees in yards.
Thank you. Next question is, can you summarize if single-family homes face any penalty for removing trees upon redevelopment?
Well, there's a fee that they have to pay for the removal of trees, and then there's a planting requirement as well. So yes, then the planting requirement, they can, if they have too, like I said previously, if they have too many on the site already, let's say they've taken a wooded lot and carved out a 1,000 square foot home, and they put in a 4,000 square foot home and carved it out of a wooded lot, they can pay for a fee in lieu of, but that's not, try and talk them out of that.
For us here, if it's a single family lot and they replace it with a single family home, our landscaping ordinance doesn't apply as far as trees being removed.
Jennifer talked a little bit about our challenges with tree canopy and tree code earlier. But if we do actually have documentation that tree removal occurred, particularly a significant tree, just over 8 inches without a permit, or more than 5 trees, we will find them 3 times the value of the tree.
Great, thank you. The next question is, do your cities have a climate action plan? And if so, are trees included in that plan?
We do have a climate action plan, but I know supporting green infrastructure is in there. To speak specifically of planting goals, I don't believe it has that.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with ours at this point yet here. I know we have a carbon neutrality by 2040, and we are trying to build an initiative to plant trees on private property, subsidize trees on private property for that initiative. So.
Hey, Andrew, Lori has a question too, if we can let her jump in.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Thanks, MJ. First, I wanted to say thank you to the panelists. This is awesome. Joe, I took particular note about the desire from the very top, the city council, the city manager, and how impactful that is. So, wishing for the same kind of thing for the city of Edina, how the tree program touches so many of our boards and commissions, but it does come from the top. How have you organized the leadership of this so that that will to include trees? I was so taken by that your engineers wouldn't think of designing a parking lot without, a rain garden or those kinds of things. How have you organized so that that is embedded in the ethos of the action that folks take?
Sure. So
and that's really for all of you, because all three of your cities have done an excellent job, and we are clearly missing that element because I don't think we have that will yet.
We and I would like to take credit for it, but it is not mine to. I mean, I've been here 20 years, and it was established before I got here. So I think we've had a forestry program here in Highland Park since the late 60s, and every community is a little different, and this community in particular is just very environmentally conscious, and it makes when I was a city forester, I considered that I had the best job in the world because I had a bunch of people that supported me. They gave me the ability to do good work, and it showed throughout the community. So, I don't have an answer. But it's starting from the top and it's working its way down.
Maybe I could just add a second question. Who's the overall leader of your tree initiative? So having in Bellevue, you have a goal of 40% canopy. That's awesome. That must be in your comprehensive plan or something to that effect. But where does it fall? Whose responsibility is that?
So it's a combination responsibility depending on the land use. So the Parks Department takes care of our parks and open spaces and our boulevard. In community development, we deal primarily with the private property owners, and our utilities and transportation also help out with our other city properties. And we're also working to develop a partnership with our local school district to increase canopy on school property, because that's one of the areas where we could really improve. So it is a joint effort.
And I'm sorry to ask this follow-up clarifying question, but who leads the effort? Because somebody's got to pull the pieces together.
Usually Jennifer.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners, staff, council members for our panelists?
I have another question.
I was going to say, go ahead, Mindy.
We've heard a little bit about funding, and I'm curious if maybe there are more answers to that question of, I heard funding that might come from fees when trees are cut down, but what other sources of funding might you have for adding to your tree canopy, especially on public property, or even for your tree giveaway programs?
Sure, I can speak to that a little bit. We do have a capital improvement budget for trees. So we just have city funded money for every year, 75,000 that we put towards tree planting. We also have a reforestation fund, which is also I guess it'd be a capital improvement also, but that was from sale of property years ago that gets used for in-kind money for grants. So we're always looking for grants to help subsidize our tree planting program. So that money that sits in that fund allows us to be able to match that as we move forward. And any lean years where we need to reforest, plant more trees, we can dip into that. So we're really a combination of city funded and grant funded, which in Minnesota here, grants have been available pretty regularly. So that's how ours are funded as far as tree planting.
We would be pretty similar. We've got a capital improvement program that funds the body of our tree planting, but you know, we do go after grants. When Emerald Ash Borer came through Illinois a little bit earlier than it's still in Minnesota, so it's working its way to Minnesota. So you know, we had to come up with a lot of trees quickly, and there was grants that were available that we applied for and got, and that certainly helped. There's also the fees though that are collected in conjunction with permits, and while those don't go directly into our revenue, you know, when it helps to impact the budgeting for the capital projects. So the money I collect, I don't see show up in account, but it does trickle its way to us eventually.
We are somewhat similar. We don't get any tree planting from our capital improvements budget, but I didn't get a chance to answer the question about the climate initiative, but we do have that, and Jennifer is the head of that program, and we do have some funds that it funds the entire program, so part of that ends up being used for tree planting. For the tree giveaway, I wrote a grant for that, and so it's funded that way through our local conservation district. We have some corporate backing, and we're investigating city forest credits and as a way to do carbon offsets and better fund our planting and preservation. Since I'm sure you all have also had challenges with budget this year during COVID, but that's one of the things that's been cut, and we're looking for a way to replace those funds.
Hey, Lori had one more question if we can grab it.
I don't want to weasel in on somebody else's question time. We're okay? Okay, this is about boulevards, and I don't know how your cities are organized, so I don't know if you have a specific transportation department, or I'm sure you must have engineering. How, what specific requirements do you have for the creation of boulevards that will support tree planting? We've recently put in some boulevards that are too small, clearly too small for tree planting. And so it's not an option there. So what are yours requirements?
In Highland Park, we don't have requirements specific to boulevards. In this area, we use a lot of salt, and it's very hard to keep boulevards alive. When we do them, we usually do just native perennials that are the toughest of tough. Some of our state roads have very strict requirements as far as visibility pulling out of subdivisions and being able to cross traffic lanes. I'm not an engineer, but it seems every time we try and put in a boulevard, there's so many restrictions that what's left is just a chopped up mess that is difficult. And you know, so then you can start to raise boulevards and put in like a raised planter to keep the salt off of them. But then you start to cut soil volume, you have watering issues, you have to irrigate them. There's just a lot of process to get boulevards. The fact that we don't have many new roads going in, there's just quite frankly not a lot of opportunity for tree specific boulevards.
Same here. I don't believe we have a specific specification for how large the boulevard, the tree lawn needs to be, but we do have an ordinance or our policy where we don't plant anything we don't plant any trees in a tree lawn that's less than 4 feet wide. It's happening though, it's getting planted in, and with this lack of, we for those in Washington, we haven't had sizable rain here in 2 months. All of our, anything planted in a lot of trees in those smaller boulevards, we're starting to see some wilt on. So they just can't support it. They cause the sidewalks to heave. And a little bit of that is, we have to meet ADA requirements with sidewalks. So that's shrinking up our lawn space. Ideally we'd have walkable streets without sidewalks, right? And we could just plant trees all along them, but that's really not feasible, as far as equitable transportation. So it's a battle. I'm going to push for road diets where we can shrink those roads up and have wider boulevards. But in an already built city like St. Louis Park and probably like Edina, it's tough to really shrink those roads up anymore when we have bike lanes and parking needs. So that's my 2 cents on that anyway.
I think pretty similar to Michael over here. We do have some neighborhood by neighborhood, specifically in our arts district and downtown, requirements for soil volume or planting strip width or setback width, as far as what's acceptable for tree planting along streets. We don't do a lot of boulevards per se in the traditional sense here in the Pacific Northwest, but we do some trees along the side of roads. I guess I should note that our single family neighborhoods primarily do not have sidewalks, and so the tree planting requirements aren't so necessary in those cases.
Thank you so much.
Are there any other questions that were in the chat that we might have missed from commissioners or Carolyn?
I have just the one question. I think Joe covered this with Highland Park and the Emerald Ash Borer, but we have trees that you can cut down without any, they're sort of encouraged to be cut down, like a silver maple or now an elm or a fruit tree, and you're still losing the carbon impact of losing that tree. And I wondered if you had any kind of replacement requirements or how you dealt with what we call nuisance trees.
Are there any last questions from those that are participating on the call?
I can maybe comment on Carolyn's question if you'd like. That's a great question, and I don't have a good answer for you because sometimes we have to take those trees down and we can't replace that. A mature tree, you just can't replace that much canopy, that much carbon sequestration with planting new trees. It takes years to replace it. So that is a good question. It's always that balance ecologically between those invasive non-native plants and their benefits versus trying to restore what we need of native species. So sorry that didn't really answer your question, but that's a tough one.
We have another non-answer over here. The county deals with invasive weeds, and while we do struggle against our invasive ground covers, the county does more with dealing with invasive trees.
Does that answer it, Carolyn?
Yep, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? I mean, the conversation doesn't have to stop tonight. You're going to be able to take a lot of this information back and have a conversation with your larger group. And our liaisons were all on this call, so they have been part of this and participating and observing it. So they can help guide some of those conversations later on too. There is one slide I wanted to show you guys if we can pop it up. I don't know, it's not a big deal, Andrew, but in the city of Edina, we have a work plan process, and Scott kind of alluded to this, that this is what started this whole idea of holding an event and learning more about trees and how commissions could be part of that. So we're in the middle of that work plan process right now. So we designed this meeting to be July so that you would still have time at some of your end meetings in July or in August, and maybe even your early meetings of September, to talk about ideas for initiatives around trees and what that would look like for you. So So take this information and hopefully you can have a broader conversation with your commission and come up with some ideas for projects or initiatives. If you have additional questions for the panel, ask your staff liaison so that we can route them. And then, of course, our final proposals or work plans are due in September. So again, you do have some time. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's here, and I want to turn it over to Scott to actually close this out, but this has been awesome.
Thank you, MJ. And really, I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank all my staff who put this together for us tonight. I think we like to think of ourselves as an evolving, learning organization. So I want to thank the wise and willing teachers who joined us tonight too. Michael, Joe, Jennifer, and Rachel. Thanks for your time. We really appreciate it. And thanks for everything tonight. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.